The election of Pope Leo XIV by the Catholic Church has sent a very clear message that is reverberating throughout the world as we speak. This message has 5 clear components which reveal the priorities of the Church in 2025, as well as in the coming years. These priorities are essentially what the Church wants to accomplish, or the direction the Holy Spirit wants the Church to go. And so in this video, I'm going to dive into these priorities, and as a Catholic theologian, I will explain in layman's terms what they mean for the Catholic Church in America, as well as for all Christians around the world. So let's begin with some context. It is pretty widely known that the previous several popes have been extremely pastoral, meaning that they've really focused on loving the Church and its people and reflecting Christ's love to them. A good analogy would be like parenting. So remember, the Church is the bride and Jesus Christ is the groom. So it is fitting that because the Church represents the mother of a family, that the Pope would sort of act in a parental role. In fact, Pope means papa, father. So the idea would be for the Pope to express this beautiful combination between a nurturing and inviting love, which is the love of the mother, and the protective and providential love of a father, right? The one who sets boundaries, protects the flock from heresy, and so on. Recently, we have had some amazing, very loving and nurturing popes. But again, theologians would consider them more pastoral in nature. These popes just acted a little bit more like the mother of a family, right? By drawing people in, showering them with love, care, and nurturing, ensuring that before a member of the Church is chastised, that they know that they are deeply loved and have had many chances to reconcile before punishment or correction. In most circumstances, this order of things, love before correction, is intrinsically good. Those of us who are parents know that it is of the utmost importance for a child to know that they are loved long before you start teaching a child right from wrong. However, many lament that the popes were not as strong in their clarity on church teaching and not strong enough in their punishments of those who were in serious error. And unfortunately, these critics are also right on many counts. With that being said, specifically regarding the clarity piece, I think the fact that none of the popes spoke English as their native tongue hurt their ability to communicate with the mainstream press in the West. Here in the States, at least, journalists are infamous for not really being journalists at all, but rather cogs in a propaganda machine. They are known for their exaggerations, lies, and misleading characterizations of the truth in order to sway public opinion. Most notably, Pope Francis was often misquoted, and his words were exaggerated by the press. Finally, none of these popes were known for their administrative abilities, not for the last 50 years or so, except perhaps Pope Benedict, but he was more of an intellectual, and so many wonder if he became overwhelmed by the enormous responsibility of a church that had not been run well for so many years, again, from an administrative perspective. So, maintaining the analogy, the Pope is the father, right? The papa of the Christian church on earth. But just like I, as a mother, must vacillate between loving my children and being firm with them, so also must the Pope. And that's why I am so excited about Pope Leo XIV. I think he will be a wonderful blend of maternal and paternal energy for the church. My first impressions are that he is kind and welcoming, like Pope Francis, but firm and clear on church teaching. He encourages critical thinking while also pressing for the preference for the poor and the laborers, like Pope Leo XIV before him. However, these are only first impressions. Will he live up to the priorities communicated by him and the other cardinals regarding the direction he wants the church to go? Let's dig a little deeper. First, let's start with the fact that Pope Leo XIV is an American, and this is a very good thing, and let me explain why. While the church in North America, admittedly, has a lot to work on, there is one thing that North Americans are very good at, and that is administration. The truth is, we are not as strong pastorally here in the States as in other areas of the world. Our faith formation is lacking, we bicker amongst ourselves, and we make mountains out of molehills because we as a culture tend to be self-focused and egotistical. But we can organize. We sure can. So I think that the amazing ministries that have come out of the States are proof of this, right? From Hallow to Exodus 90, Word on Fire, and other ministries show that when we combine our organizational capacities and our access to resources with a mission to grow either in evangelization, spiritual depth, and the ministries of the church, we, Americans, with the help of the Holy Spirit, can make great things happen. And this is awesome. But remember, the church doesn't just need an administrator. We also need a pastor. We need someone with a heart for the Christ Church and a deep love for all of his people. Latin America in particular is known for being very focused on the preference to the poor, which is what South American bishops brought back after attending Vatican II in the 60s. So let's talk a little bit about the concept of liberation theology. Liberation theology can really be summed up in this quote from the book 20th Century Theologians, and specifically the chapter discussing one of the fathers of liberation theology, Gustavo Gutierrez. For context, after moving back home to Lima, Peru, after he was studying in Europe to become a priest, Gustavo was met with much suffering. Since the 1950s, Lima's population exploded, leaving over 80% of the nation's capital underemployed, which basically meant that people had to scrap and claw to survive. The author states, there, his psyche was seared by the unremitting reality of his people's poverty, hopelessness, and misery. How is it possible to tell such people that God providentially loves them and cares for them when they are forced to feed stewed rat to their children and compete with feral dogs to find food? This cry of the poor still reverberates throughout the Christian world, even if we don't hear it here in the States among the distractions of wealth, privilege, and social media. So Pope Leo XIV, having spent many years as a missionary to the Third World in South America, is the perfect candidate to support the church both administratively and pastorally. And he has made it clear that a preference for the poor and the church's mission to intervene directly on behalf of the poor, as Pope Leo XIII states in Rerum Novarum, is going to be a primary concern of the church moving forward. Additionally, being North American is a good thing because it means that he is a native English speaker. The Western press will not be able to mistranslate him. And I hope that his understanding of the way that the press and content creators in the West tend to sway the public opinion of the church will be top of mind when he's answering questions and even speaking casually with reporters. I hope he gives a really clear message regarding church teaching. So here we see some initial priorities. 1, improved administration. 2, clarity in teaching. And 3, a deep and providential love for the poor and the disadvantaged. I'm talking about a love that provides for the world's poor, the suffering, and the most in need, both spiritually and physically. And we Americans get to set our differences aside and get on board with this mission. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, this would be an awesome time to hit the like button and maybe even consider subscribing. On my channel, I talk a lot about church culture, motherhood, and spirituality, and I would love to have you along for the ride. Okay, so the fourth priority is explicitly stated by Pope Leo himself in his motto, in illo uno unum, which means in the one, we are one. The phrase is taken from St. Augustine's exposition on Psalm 127, where he explains that although we Christians are many, in the one Christ, we are one. This is a clear call for unity among Catholics, and in particular, those of us in America who have so many eyes on us. We would do well to align with this mission of unity and prioritize it over gathering a large social media following, going viral, or engaging in the silly tribal games where we attempt to distinguish ourselves from other Catholics by being the first to cry heresy or claiming that the Catholic Church has been infiltrated. As if Christ did not tell us himself in Matthew 16:18, and so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. As if the church could be infiltrated, honestly. Listen, as exciting as I'm sure it is to be able to provide for one's family through a large social media following, promoting disunity, creating division within Christ's church, and sowing seeds of skepticism is not the work of the Lord. That is the work of the devil, and it has no place in the Catholic Church. Pope Leo XIV makes his position clear not only on the disunity within the church, but also on this sort of widespread pessimism in his first homily. Here he states, in this regard, I would like us to renew together today our complete commitment to the path that the Universal Church has now followed for decades in the wake of the Second Vatican Council. Pope Francis masterfully and concretely set it forth in the apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. Now, before we dive into the remainder of that quote, let's take a closer look at the apostolic exhortation in question, Evangelii Gaudium by Pope Francis. In a section entitled Saying No to Warring Between Ourselves, Pope Francis states, in this sense, we can once again listen to the words of Blessed John the 23rd. At times, we have to listen, much to our regret, to the voices of people who, though burning with zeal, lack a sense of discretion and measure. In this modern age, they can see nothing but prevarication and ruin. We feel that we must disagree with those prophets of doom who are always forecasting disaster, as though the end of the world were at hand. In our times, divine providence is leading us to a new order of human relations, which, by human effort and even beyond all expectations, are directed to the fulfillment of God's superior and inscrutable designs, in which everything, even human setbacks, leads to the greater good of the church. In another section entitled No to Spiritual Worldliness, he says, this worldliness can be fueled in two deeply interrelated ways. One is the attraction of Gnosticism, a purely subjective faith. The other is the self-absorbed Promethean Neoplagianism of those who ultimately trust only in their own powers and feel superior to others because they observe certain rules or remain faithful to a particular Catholic style from the past. A supposed soundness of doctrine or discipline leads instead to a narcissistic and authoritarian elitism, whereby instead of evangelizing, one analyzes and classifies others. Instead of opening the door to grace, one exhausts his or her energies in inspecting and verifying. In neither case is one really concerned about Jesus Christ. It is impossible to think that a genuine evangelizing could emerge from these adulterated forms of Christianity. Wow, this is a very clear correction to the warring factions on social media here in the West. And that's not all. Pope Francis continues. Spiritual worldliness leads some Christians to war with other Christians who stand in the way of their quest for power, prestige, pleasure, and economic security. Some are even no longer content to live as part of the greater church community, but stoke a spirit of exclusivity, creating an inner circle instead of belonging to the whole church in all its rich variety. They belong to this or that group, which thinks itself different or special. I'll offer one more quote regarding those who have chosen to create divisions within the church and who are turning their liturgy, customs, or traditions into their hill to die on, so to speak. Here's Pope Leo XIV himself in a speech he gave to the Eastern Rite Catholics on May 14th, 2025. Over a century ago, Pope Leo XIII pointed out that preserving the Eastern rites is more important than is generally realized. He went so far as to decree that any Latin Rite missionary, whether a member of the secular or regular clergy, who by advice or support draws any Eastern Rite Catholic to the Latin Rite, ought to be dismissed and removed from his office. Wow. Pope Leo, in quoting the other Pope Leo, the 13th, has made it clear here that each rite in union with the Catholic Church is fully welcome and realized within the one true Church. Finally, we get to the fifth priority of the Church, which is evangelism. We'll continue the quote we began before from Pope Leo XIV's first homily that he gave to the College of Cardinals on May 10th of this year. Pope Francis masterfully and concretely set it forth in the apostolic exhortation, Evangelization, from which I would like to highlight several fundamental points. The return to the primacy of Christ in proclamation, the missionary conversion of the entire Christian community, so evangelism, growth in collegiality and synodality, attention to the sensus fidei, which is a universal consent in matters of faith and morals, especially in its most authentic and inclusive forms, such as popular piety, loving care for the least and the rejected, courageous and trusting dialogue with the contemporary world in its various components and realities. So there you have it, the 5 primary concerns of the Church, in no particular order: administration, clarity and teaching, pastoral care and formation, unity, and evangelization. Here in the States, it's really easy for American Catholics and Christians to trick ourselves into thinking we are the center of the universe, and that our concerns and our cares about politics, wokeism, or the silly civil wars we love to provoke are the things that everyone is worried about. We trick ourselves into thinking that our cares and concerns are those of the Church. And yet the Church has made one thing very clear in this papal election. Her priorities are not America's priorities. While we in the States bash one another online, seek the adrenaline rush of a heated debate, or take sides during the public slander of yet another big-name apologist, the Church is busy doing the Lord's work. And she has made her aim very clear through Pope Leo XIV. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this video, you will love another video I made recently, which is about the Catholic war on feminism. I think you'll find it very interesting, and so I suggest you go there next. God bless you all.